Welcome to the Linguistic Validation Café series, a place to gather, connect, learn, and grow together by creating community, embracing our cultures, and sharing our passion for linguistic validation. This is the space and time we take to embrace diversity and discuss how to improve the human aspects of medical translation. In this second episode, The Language of Understanding, Cognitive Debriefing and Patient Recruitment in Linguistic Validation, we're going to talk about what cognitive debriefing is, its importance for the cultural adaptation of clinical outcome assessments, and the role linguistic validation specialists play in improving patients' health and quality of life. With our moderator, Tomislav Geršić, and our expert guests, Nataliya Nedkova and Cathal Monaghan. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this second episode of the Linguistic Validation Café series, and where we are going to find out what cognitive debriefing is, its importance for the cultural adaptation of clinical outcome assessments, and the role linguistic validation specialists play in improving patients' health and quality of life. We have our moderator today, Tomislav Geršić, and our expert guests, Nataliya Nedkova and Cathal Monaghan. I'm going to introduce all of you to them, but introduce them to you. Today, I don't know what's happening, but it's fine, you know, don't worry. I'm going to introduce them to you. And everyone here joining us, thank you so much, because we are not alone. We have all the group of the Linguistic Validation Café with us and who help us create this space. And I'm very grateful that you are being able to be with us today. So to introduce each of you, Tomislav Geršić is a clinical research professional with 15 years of medical translation experience, more than a decade of which within linguistic validation. He is the founder and managing director of Borliner, provider of clinical outcome assessment, translation, and linguistic validation, licensing and eCOA migration and consulting services for copyright holders, pharmaceutical companies, and CROs, as well as LSPs. Welcome officially, Tomislav. Thank you so much.
Thank
you. Nataliya Nedkova is the owner and managing director of N Translations, a long-standing company based in Bulgaria, which provides medical translation and linguistic validation services. She holds a bachelor's degree in English language and literature and a master's degree in translation, and is a member of the Chartered Institute of Linguists and an ELIA member as well. With over 16 years of experience as a linguist and a company owner and about 10 years as a linguistic validation consultant, she also works as a business consultant, providing startups in the translation field with valuable guidance founded on her extensive industry expertise. Additionally, she manages complex linguistic validation projects, collaborates on harmonization meetings, and supports eCOA services. Inspired by Bert Hellinger's concept of the movement of the soul as a movement in accordance with a larger force, she's deeply committed to continuous learning, professional growth, and fostering a culture of openness, trust, and collaboration in every professional relationship. Welcome, Nataliya. So happy to have you here. And lastly, we have Cathal Monaghan. Sorry, that was my dog with the bone that he just dropped. But that's how we are in the Linguistic Validation Café. Remember that this is an informal gathering. And sorry, Cathal. Cathal Monaghan has over 8 years of experience as a translator, specializing in life sciences and legal texts, and 3 years as a linguistic validation consultant. He has managed end-to-end linguistic validation projects in English across multiple regions, including the US, the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and recently Hong Kong. Cathal's experience spans clinical outcome assessments, such as patient-reported outcomes, clinician-reported outcomes, and more, along with preparing translations for electronic platforms. With a master's degree in translation and certifications in clinical outcome assessment, he brings a wealth of professional experience in the table. Known for his ability to engage diverse patient populations and deliver high-quality, timely results, Cathal is passionate about improving global health through precise communication and linguistic solutions. I'm excited to, sorry, that's another part of the, okay. Thank you very much, Cathal, for being here today with us as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, with this crazy group, it's so nice. Thank you. So we are going to start with maybe a question that I have, and I want to ask this to Tomislav. Which is so that people who are listening to us may know and who are not familiar with either linguistic validation or with cognitive debriefing, mostly, let's say. What is cognitive debriefing and why is it necessary, Tomislav? I would like you to tell us.
Okay, well, hello, first of all, hello, everyone. Nice to see so many familiar faces. It seems that this is a great learning opportunity for the entire audience, but also hopefully for many of our clients, as we've seen that the terms linguistic validation and cognitive debriefing are not properly always or in full understood by the clients, and what are the requirements here and how it is done, why it is done. Cognitive debriefing, well, it's a step in the linguistic validation process of interviewing subjects with specific health conditions to which this questionnaire or instrument, as it's also called, is related. The purpose when we do cognitive debriefing interviews, the purpose is twofold. We're collecting qualitative feedback to determine two things. The first one is if the patients understand the translated text. So we need to ensure that the translated text is understandable to patients of all ages, educational levels, etc. Then again, more importantly, by cognitive debriefing, we are determining how exactly the patients understand the translated text. That's even more important. Why? Because using patient feedback, we are able to align the translation with the intended meaning of each item or question of the questionnaire to ensure two things: conceptual equivalence and also cultural relevance and cultural appropriateness of the translations. The ultimate goal of the entire linguistic validation process is to ensure that the translated questionnaires retain their original scientific validation, which the original questionnaire has obtained over the scientific process of its development. That means that the original instrument has been proven to measure specific concepts related to a condition of interest. And it's our goal to ensure that this is retained in all the other languages. Why is it important? Because through this process, we are ensuring that, for instance, when a clinical trial is run in 20 countries, all of the patients in all of the different countries on all of the different languages are answering exactly the same questions. That is, that the same concepts are being measured across all countries. Eventually, this ensures data consistency and comparability across countries, providing clinical research sponsors the much required evidence that for their new drug applications after the clinical trial has been completed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that comprehensive explanation. How you know you mentioned how it fits really in the linguistic validation process, right? So would you like to go ahead and move forward with our guest speakers? I give you the floor.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nataliya and Cathal, for accepting to be the speakers of this cafe. You are both quite experienced linguistic validation consultants, having done a number of cognitive debriefing projects, and it is a task that requires experience, and where experience supports you with further projects, not only the interviewing part, but also the patient recruitment part. And in my experience, not many linguists are eager to work on cognitive debriefing. That's not something you cannot find many people interested in such projects, because it's significantly different from the regular translation work we do, and it requires a special skill set, and it's significantly different. Natalie, in your experience, what's required to be a good patient interviewer, and in your opinion, what profile fits best for this type of work?
I would say that cognitive debrief, good cognitive debrief, there are many good cognitive debriefers, and they are not always linguistic validation consultants, and there are linguistic validation consultants who are not cognitive debriefers, but their role as a whole may overlap. And the difference here is that the linguistic validation consultant could be also is the best thing to do for the linguistic validation consultant is to be also a cognitive debriefer, because in this way he will be able to oversee the entire process of adapting materials, which involves reconciliation and back translation review and final proofreading and cognitive debriefing. And well, I could share some of my experience in my own country about patient recruitment, and the specific thing that we always need to keep into consideration, the country-specific approach. Which is essential, because cultural, linguistic, and healthcare systems may vary across regions. And in many cases, strategies that work well in one country may not be effective at all in another country. And one of the strategies many colleagues abroad may apply is contacting patient associations. Unfortunately, this method in my country is not effective, and I'll tell you now why. Quite often those patient associations here lack the resources or willingness to help. And when I contacted my mediator I work with, who is a retired doctor, a linguistic validation consultant, and cognitive debriefer, he explained me the reason why the associations here do not work in the appropriate way. He said that the so-called associations, usually they're not genuine. They have one director who handles the funds, and sometimes with the help of a single secretary, and they lack a permanent office. They have fictitious phone numbers and emails, and funding comes from pharma companies and their local representative offices, and there is no involvement of the government or country in them.
That's a very interesting perspective. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's a very interesting perspective, because in my experience, patient organizations have been shown to be very useful and interested in supporting linguistic validation efforts, because while it aligns with their purpose to helping their patients, and when they are properly explained that their patients supporting us with cognitive debriefing and linguistic validation will contribute to that a clinical trial for this patient population can be run in their country, which also means that a new therapeutic option is being developed and will most probably be on the market if it shows effective in several years. So I'm curious about your experience, Cathal, with patient organizations.
Yeah, I think, in theory, we should be able to contact hospitals and clinics and medical centers, but in practice, in my experience, it doesn't work in practice because doctors are just overrun and have too much work. So they unless you have a personal relationship with the doctor, I find that they're generally not that interested in recruitment. And I'm talking about the projects I've worked on for in Ireland, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. In my experience, what I've done is I've contacted local patient support organizations, and I found that patient support groups on Facebook can be quite challenging, because normally they're managed by a number of admins who are, I would refer to them as gatekeepers. So they try to protect their members who may be vulnerable, who may be suffering a serious illness. And I completely understand that they don't want people joining the group trying to sell products or trying to sell medicines, etc., to vulnerable people. So it can be quite challenging to put forward a convincing or persuasive argument to the admins of Facebook groups, also because you're sending them, a message on Facebook. So it's a bit quite difficult, but I find patient support groups in general, if you can contact them and find the correct person within that organization and have a very well explained story, or explanation about why you want to speak to patients and why it's ultimately beneficial for patients and the patient support group, I think they can be extremely helpful and can help you find respondents extremely quickly. So you can go from having zero, and I mentioned this earlier on, speaking to another colleague, that patient recruitment in cognitive debriefing is like a microcosm of being a freelancer, because it's like a roller coaster of emotions, like the happiness of being assigned a project, through to the unknown element of am I ever going to find patients to participate in my project, to the satisfaction of finding someone in a patient support group who's happy to share your research, to share your project with their community. And it's a lot of it comes down to how well you can craft what eventually, like ultimately, it's almost a sales pitch. You're explaining to people who don't know you why they should allow you access to their patient support group. So it's how well can you explain your story, and really, like, it comes down to, do they trust you, and trust is something that I found. For example, recently I worked on my first project in Hong Kong, for sleep disorders, and that was a really challenging recruitment. I contacted a lot of different organizations in Hong Kong, sleep research organizations, sleep research societies, sleep consultants, clinical psychologists, and I think I must have contacted maybe 150 different entities, and I received 2 replies. So it can be extremely challenging, and there may be a cultural element there that I'm, ignorant of, or there may be an element of lack of trust for somebody, from living in Spain, contacting people in Hong Kong to, I don't know. I'm only guessing, but in the end, on that project, I reached out to some translator colleagues in Hong Kong who were able to help me, who were able to facilitate contacts with other people in Hong Kong. That was my way of getting around it, and without that, it was, I tried everybody, and another
That's very
example.
interesting.
Sorry.
That's very interesting. And if I understood correctly, actually, your experience with patient organizations is completely the opposite of Natalie's.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So it is really interesting how a different country, a different health system, a different way of doing things, essentially, completely different. Without patient support groups, I would not be able to do my job.
Natalie, in your experience, which recruitment channels have shown to be most effective for you?
Well, I would would say that the Facebook groups have been partially successful for me, and I think that this mainly depends on the patients and to what extent they are actively involved in the online health communities. Because sometimes there are great participants from the Facebook groups, and the administrators are very prone to help you and assist you in finding the right participants. And sometimes, well, it happens much more often when initially the potential participants say that they have this specific disease, but actually they don't have it, and yes, and they are more interested in the financial compensation in this case. At least this is what my experience shows. And for me, the most effective strategy here is to contact a mediator, but this should be a medical doctor or healthcare professional who is very, very experienced in patient recruitment, not just any kind of doctor. A doctor who is experienced in patient recruitment, who has an established network of patients, who understands the nuance of recruitment, and he should understand the concept of cognitive debriefing. And this makes the doctor, the medical doctor, the healthcare provider, a successful patient recruiter for me.
That makes me think it's curious because what you, Cathal, were saying, it's like you couldn't recruit patients if you didn't have patients associations, but Nataliya that has no patients associations, and she has to find alternatives. And like for colleagues who may feel the stress of having to recruit patients, what would you advise to them? Because from what I see and from my own experience, of course, it's like sometimes we think that it's a matter of we call the first patients association and they will say yes, and if not, it's like we are not getting anybody, and in truth, it's like it takes a lot of hours, a lot of days in contacting a lot of people. So I'm curious with you, Cathal, what would be the average of number of people that you contact in order to cover, well, let's say a project that is not a rare disease, and it's just
Well,
more of a
yeah. If I like, Ireland is a small country. The population of the entire island of Ireland is less than 5 million, so it's an average sized city, basically. So when you're looking for patient support groups, there might be one or two patient support groups. So what I've learned is that I said this already, but it bears repeating, is that your initial approach to a patient support group has to be a very robust, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like basically the person who reads, if you're calling them or you're emailing them, your first communication with them should be enough to inspire trust in them, or to at least inspire curiosity in them for them to want to contact you. Because if you've only got one or two patient support groups, then that communication is quite important. So basically refining your message, your way of outreach is extremely important, because there may be one person. So basically it comes down to contacting two people. So it's like you've got two chances, basically two opportunities, so you've got to present your case in a way that makes them want to engage with you, and it's definitely trial and error. There's some A/B testing there that people in marketing might be aware of, or I guess people in sales as well. It's like I think there is a certain element of a sales pitch in there. You're trying to convince people to help you, which like you want them to help you so you can help them. It's a bit of a it's like a kind of a catch-22 in a way, but really the message that you convey to them, I think, is even probably more important than finding you can you can ask ChatGPT to give you a list of patient support groups for a specific disease, and that can be helpful. But even in the UK, there's not that, there's in the UK, I've worked on several bleeding disorder projects. There's one main haemophilia charity in the UK, and the UK is a big, the population of the UK, what is 60 million? Like that's one patient support group, so for me, conveying your message, curating your message is really important,
Cathal, what are your experiences with clinician contacts? So with healthcare providers to refer patients to you?
Well, so I'm based in Spain. I'm not based in country. So, I have some clinician contacts in Ireland, but in terms of, so I use them sometimes for clinician reviews, but for recruitment, they have not been a channel for me to use. And I just don't have clinician contacts in the other countries where I recruit in. So for me, that's why patient support groups are they're my main source of contacts, and like Natalie mentioned Facebook, but I've been able to maybe get a few respondents from Facebook, but not really. And people don't respond if you post, like, I've tried posting on Facebook, general posts, or posts on LinkedIn, and people don't engage,
Natalie, but your experience with clinicians is a good one. Right?
Yes, very good one. This is the most effective strategy for recruitment patients here. And I would like to share one more effective strategy that might at first seem a bit strange for some of you, but it's a very positive experience for me. And in the past, I had to recruit 5 children and their caregivers, and these children had to suffer from SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. And I just came across a Facebook post about a Christmas charity event for children who were affected with this disease. So I attended the event, and I needed just 5 people, just 5 caregivers. They were obviously the parents and 5 kids. And I left the event with more than 10 participants. Which means that for me, this means that the direct approach and the personal contact built great trust and credibility in this case. And also, I was thinking yesterday that similarly, participating in World Day events for a specific disease, let's say World Heart Day or World Diabetes Day, there you may also meet a lot of patients, a lot of caregivers, and you can be open to more opportunities to meet patients. And again, I think that the personal contact and the direct approach are essential.
What has happened to me many times that I'm thinking now as you're speaking is that many times you recruit one patient, and that very same patient provides you the rest because they are in direct contact with other patients. They have become friends, and even it's not through the association anymore. They just, well, I normally in any case donate to the association because I consider that everything came from the association, even though it's just one patient from the association and then the rest, but all belong there. But that aside, because that's another good thing, if you donate an amount to the association, not only for helping you find the patients, but also, well, out of your own will, they will be super receptive, and you will forever have patients for that condition. So you are like establishing conditions that you can cover in the future. But many times, you know, this you ask the very same patient, do you know someone else? And say, of course, you know, many people, and they would love to join. And so that's well, like an extra thing within the associations. And I think it's a great approach to, if you can physically go to a place or online events that you can join, find out, and be there. That's a great approach.
Can I just say as well that my approach is extremely different to Natalie's, and like I find your approach, you know, if I was living in Ireland, then those approaches, like that would be really interesting, you know, because I think if you can take that into your own hands, like you did, and go to an event and actually engage with people rather than, you know, trying to find people online and calling people, like, because you're basically cold calling or cold emailing people, and it's like if people are suspicious, and you know, to try to build that trust, it would be much easier to do that in person than it is, you know, through a phone call or via email. But so my explanation of how I recruit is very specific to my situation, because I'm not based in country. So just so people are aware that, you know, there are different ways to do it, and if you are in country, I would suggest to try and bring a human touch into it as much as possible, like Natalie has done, you know, because that could be a very successful way of doing it, or fruitful way of doing it, rather than my approach, which I'm limited to based on my geographic location, you know.
Yeah, that takes us to a very interesting topic, because really, since the post-COVID, we are able to do interviews online. In the past, we had we were discussing a bit that before we started with the podcast, and before we had to do it in person. So that was one of the main reasons why we needed consultants, in-country consultants, right? Not only because you know the language and the culture, which is paramount, but also because you needed to be physically there. And now that scenario has created other options for us. Sometimes we are located elsewhere. We are not anymore in our mother country, and that is not, well, it's not a requirement as strict anymore, because we can provide, if we can recruit and we can do the interviews, then we can provide great quality. In any case, it's not as easy, because if you are in the country, you have more options, as Natalie just mentioned, of course. But in any case, I think, for example, having a good website where patients can check you up, like if you contact them and they can say, because if somebody contacts me for that, I want to know who they are. And if I can check them out and they have a clear website and it's clear to me what they do in my language, let's say, or at least a section that is in my language that I can see, or they can refer me to, then besides, you know, telling me we are working for this client and so on, and okay, I can check this company or so ever, but I can check them directly, and it gives me confidence, right? So depending on each country, it will be a nice strategy. What I'm concerned is about the stress, you know, of like having to recruit is a stressful process, because you have committed to, you have said to the company that you're collaborating with, yes, I can do this for you. But then it's a matter of days, and you need to get the people, and then you need to do the interviews, or to educate the participants in how the interviews will be conducted, and then conduct the interviews, and then to write your report. So so I would like to, you know, what advice can you give, or what tips could you give to cope with this? Because well,
I would say, first of all, so the client will normally provide the specific inclusion or exclusion criteria. I would say you need to review that extremely closely, and maybe even do some quick research before you accept the project, just to make sure that you're comfortable with the level of potential stress that might be involved in trying to find people with that disease or illness, sorry. I can give an example of one of the first projects I worked on for Ireland. Was an illness, and I actually ended up speaking to patient number 1 of that illness in Ireland. I found a news article, an interview with a guy who was a mechanic for the Air Force, and he developed this illness as a result of working in an environment where there was lots of toxic products in his workplace. And trying to find, it was tricky, but so that would be one suggestion I would make. Just be sure that you're comfortable with the level of uncertainty around the potential lack of respondents or what they're diagnosed with. I was recently offered a project for a LINUS, and they were looking for a diagnosis with human rhinovirus, which is it's one of the most frequent causes of the common cold. But for me, from my perspective, I mean, can you diagnose someone with the cold? Like, is that a diagnosis that anybody ever gets? It's like, this is a question that I asked the client. It's like, how do I find respondents who are diagnosed with the cold? I mean, it seems like kind of I'm not a doctor. Maybe people do get diagnosed with the cold, but in my experience, I've never been diagnosed with the cold, But
yeah, like having an official diagnosis, right? You have a cold, but they don't write a report saying you have a cold.
So just to finish up and give someone else a chance to talk, but my question to them was, okay, so there are numerous other illnesses that are linked to HRV, which could be asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, bronchitis, etc. Can the potential respondents be diagnosed with those illnesses, or am I restricted to HRV? So if you can try and make your job a bit easier by asking the client to expand their recruitment criteria a little, then it makes your life easier and also means you're not going to delay the project.
Indeed, it's sometimes recruitment shows to be difficult. What's also important to consider is that it's not, most commonly, it's not the client, whether it's a translation company, whether it's a copyright holder, it's not them who are defining the recruitment criteria. Most commonly, it's the instrument developer, either a team of developers or an individual who demands that we mimic the target population of this questionnaire as much as possible. But in the absence of adequate resources, that's something we can also try to explore and see if the recruitment criteria can be modified. And I can't say always, but frequently, the developers are able to somewhat modify the criteria based on the symptoms that they are looking for. What's important in cognitive debriefing is that we mimic the process as much as possible, the process of the actual administration of this questionnaire later in real world circumstances, that is within a clinical trial, within some scientific research. So we are truly expected to work with actual patients who suffer from these specific conditions and symptoms. Why? Because they can fully understand why a question is being asked, and they can relate to the question. They know that these symptoms are something perhaps they don't have frequently, but they are aware that these symptoms are related to their question, and they understand why it is being asked. And this way we can confirm that they have really understood. What I wanted to add regarding the patient recruitment and talking to patients. I think it's quite important for the patients to understand the purpose of the interviews and to be very transparent that we do not collect any patient personal information, although you as the interviewer may have their name, their phone number, or their email address. But that's not something that is transferred to the client, that your work is not related to their health status. We are not collecting information about their health. We are not asking them to complete the questionnaires. We are asking them to explain in their own words how they understand each question of this questionnaire. Having transparency with this also contributes to building trust with patients.
We we have a question by Rachel Lee. She's linguistic validation consultant for English UK. And she's asking, how do you avoid flooding potential candidates with information that could make them feel too overwhelmed? For example, do you recommend a brief message for first contact, and only if they are interested, then provide more detailed information on demographic data and the need for audio recording of the interview and so on? So
that's what I was just going to mention, that point. So originally I used to send people who were interested, I would send them a big email, which I thought was like, okay, it explains everything, like all the points that Tomislav touched off. It's all anonymized. You've got a confidentiality agreement. It's like, because I like to have lots of information, so I thought, okay, other people are going to want to have lots of information. And what I found was 9 times out of 10, people don't read the email, you know? So it's like, if you can send a couple of lines mentioning what Tomislav said, like that, it's their anonymity will be maintained and it's confidential. It's only for the purposes of the translation, and you know, a couple of quick points, and then say that you will give more background at the outset, at the beginning of the call. I find that works well, because otherwise, you know, maybe some people do. I don't know, but in my experience, most people don't read a long email. So it's like, try and keep it as brief as possible with some with the most important points, just enough to make people feel comfortable with the fact that they're going to be talking to a stranger, but that you're not going to be you know, selling their information on the black market. You know?
And yes, and I would like to add something else as well, that in the body of the email, we should highlight the importance of providing incentives for the participants. I usually bought this text, so people could pay more attention on this part. Because as Kaha said, many people don't read the emails. So they just because afterwards they keep asking me the same questions. I already put the answers in the emails, and I think that we should clearly say that these interviews are typically conducted over the phone. So this may also increase the interest in participating. And yes, I was thinking about something else. Do you over recruit patients sometimes, especially when the timeline, the timelines are tight? For example, I haven't actually tried this approach with my mediator, but I was thinking that if the timeline is too tight, and he may recruit 6 participants instead of 5 for me. Have you tried this?
Yeah, so I get that's like overbooking on a plane, I guess. No,
Yeah.
I think, you know, and that an idea has just come to my mind. So it's like, it's probably better to have one extra person and maybe pay that person half the recruitment fee, just to be on standby, just in case somebody else, you know. And if they don't ever do the interview, then you just pay them half the fee, and you're kind of saving yourself the stress of potentially someone canceling at the last minute, which can happen if people are dealing with illnesses.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been fairly lucky, but I think that's a good idea, actually. You know, maybe overbooking and paying them half. You know, paying them something. You know?
Normally,
and
it's better
also
to target
sometimes I
6.
offer sometimes I offer slightly higher incentives for the participants or their replacements, again, just to motivate them to participate, especially when the project has tight timelines.
Yeah, I mean, my project in Hong Kong, I had to increase my rates, and I had to offer people referral fees, and you know, you know, you can also offer. Some people actually aren't interested in the compensation, and they'll, like, I say, okay, I can pay you this compensation, or I can make a donation to a charity of your choice. And sometimes people prefer to like have you donate to the charity that originally they contacted you through, you know. That happens regularly as well.
And sometimes people make me buy vouchers for them. And I do it.
Yes. We have a question related to this by Emmanuelle Genon from France, and her question is, patients can choose to stop the interview at any time, right? So how do you account for that? Do you recruit more patients than the number of interviews you need, usually 5? The answer is yes. Normally what I do is I target 6. I have 5, the ones that I know that I'm going to do it with, but I always have in mind a 6th one, just in case. It's always good because also the person sadly may die in the process. And, you know, some patients have very serious illnesses. Others may just get sick during the days that you have a schedule with them and cannot do the interview with you. So it's good. Yes, to have any more insights on this. I have more questions here. Who is deciding the compensation fee for the patient? The linguistic validation consultant or the client?
Well, I mean, you can pay your entire fee. You can pay your entire fee to the patients if you want, but then you're not going to have any money. So it's up to you to decide. And you have to find the magic point between enough to entice people to want to participate and not too much to, you know, you're basically giving away your you know, the amount of however much you pay your client or however much more you pay respondents, you know, that affects your bottom line, you know, so it's finding a magic balance.
I'd also say you mentioned previously with Facebook groups that patients that actually don't have this health condition that's required would get in touch just for the incentive fee. So it's also again a matter of balancing. I think you want patients to get in touch, but then you don't want them to get in touch for the fee. You want to have the fee. You want to have the fee low, just as a thank you token of gratitude. And the patients should also have some inherent internal motive to get in touch. That's because they truly want to support this project because it contributes to the development of this potential new treatment option for their condition. So too high patient fees might backfire by not recruiting the actual target population. Do you agree?
Well, I think that the more involved the person is, the better the interview will go because they are wholeheartedly involved, wholeheartedly invested. Yes, instead of just wanting the money, let's say, and it's going to, and in the end, that's not the reason why we recruit patients and interview them. Is not because they are not working for us professionally. It's just a voluntary participation, and it's just an incentive. As Tomislav said, it's a token of appreciation for their participation. So it's finding the balance for each of your countries, I guess, what is appropriate. And also what I do is I don't give the same amount every time. I give it depending on the length of the questionnaire, the length of time they will be with me, because it's not the same. Some questionnaires may take you 15 minutes for the interview and others 3 hours. So I try to adapt and compensate them accordingly. What you were mentioning, Cathal, about who is paying the linguistic validation consultant. I mean, who decides how much to pay? Depending on companies, it will be you, but other companies will be asking you how much is your incentives per patient, and they will calculate the budget according to that. Afterwards, you will give that incentive, that quantity. Others sometimes will have recruited the patients for you, so they will do it directly and you will only do the interviews. Sometimes it can happen as well. But
I haven't come across that. I haven't come across that yet, but I'm looking forward to that.
Normally small research companies, very small, that they even have their own patients, and they you know, or sometimes it's just for one language and they may have it. So it depends, but the incentives are either agreed with the client at first and you simply pass it along to the patient, or you decide within your budget what is correct for your country. And
I think it comes back to what I was saying too about your explanation to your explanation as to why the research is taking place. If patients understand why you're doing it, then they're generally interested in helping further research on the illness that they have. You know, because that's their focus. You know, I think, you know, spending an hour talking to you, I generally think that people don't do it because they want to have, you know, they want an extra, whatever it is, you know, 40 euros or whatever. You know, I think they're interested in furthering research and helping other people who are living with the illness that they live with.
I wanted to add something. Sorry,
Yes.
no, something we also touched previously earlier when we were in breakout rooms. Sometimes recruitment indeed shows difficult, if not impossible. So there are rare conditions. You don't have patient organizations everywhere. Sometimes, like Natalie said, patient organizations simply don't work. So you may come across actual recruitment difficulties that you're in the position of not being able to find a single patient, and you have promised to deliver the project. I just wanted to assure everyone that it's okay to ask the client for help. Why? Because the client who was requested for this translation, who has commissioned the work from you, they were most probably contacted by, so the end client is a pharmaceutical sponsor most frequently. That means they will only commission a translation when they have a clinical trial in preparation in this country for this language. And by the time they are requesting the translation, they have a site already ready. So that research site in that country will also be recruiting patients with exactly the same condition for which you are recruiting your patients. And always feel free to reach out to your client, whether it's a copyright holder, a translation company, and ask them, okay, I'm stuck. I've explored all the options and there's no option for me moving forward. Can you please check with your client, with the sponsor, and see if they are able to connect me with their research site, who should be able to connect me with patients.
I have a little story about that for one of my clients, and maybe you guys can have some input. That I found the clinical trial that the research was for, and I went to clinicaltrials.gov and I found the details of doctors involved in the clinical trials, and I reached out to a couple of the doctors in the clinical trial. And now my client emailed me, and they were extremely unhappy with the fact that I had reached out to the doctors on the clinical trial and said that, you know, this is something that you can't do, you know, you can't, like, basically you can never do this ever again, you know, which I thought was like, okay, you know, it didn't really seem to make sense to me that their I would say anger, I won't call it fury, but they were extremely unhappy with the fact that I reached out to the doctors on the clinical trial.
It seems to me that they felt, how to say it, that you were trying to steal their client. I would say that that's the reason, because there is no, someone also asked earlier, is it a problem if we do cognitive debriefing with actual patients who might be part of this clinical trial? And no, it's not a problem. Previous exposure to a questionnaire is not a problem. In fact, that's the whole purpose of using questionnaires in a clinical trial, that the patients will be answering the questionnaire multiple times. First, the baseline at randomization, and then again, depending on the visit schedule, every quarterly or biannual or whatever. So, that shouldn't be a problem.
And you will be able also to maybe have the patients who have not been included in the study. They have been recruited, but for some reason they don't comply with the inclusion criteria, but they have the condition. So they are good to, you know, to participate in the cognitive debriefing interviews. But I'm with Tomislav. I don't see any issues apart from them thinking that you may want to steal the direct client. But if not, you know, it's not.
That thought never entered my mind. I can assure you. Actually, until you just said it. But yeah, maybe that's why.
But we always. I try also to go to sites where I know that, you know, they are running clinical trials for that condition, and just contact them. It may happen that it may coincide that it's the same clinical trial that I'm doing the cognitive debriefing for that questionnaire, but yeah, it's always a good way. So I wouldn't you know, leave out that option, because that's absolutely possible. Just maybe for this client, find out that you don't do it with the same site.
But I'm curious how they would have reacted if you had gone through them. So asking the client, hey, can your sponsor help me with recruitment? Perhaps they would have connected you to the same site.
Yeah.
Yes. Just that way, it's much better. Or let them know, you know, I don't have more options. I'm considering this. Would you be okay if you put me in contact with them? Or at least let me know which site, so that I may find alternatives. We have a question from Mariana Teixeira from Portugal, and she would like to know, usually how long does recruitment take? Do you start recruiting right after you get the approval for the project? Well, the answer is yes, right after, but then usually how long does recruitment take?
Well, I would say that it actually depends. Sometimes you may recruit 3 or 4 people, or even 5 people for a day, and sometimes it takes much longer to recruit these people. It depends, of course, on the strategies you've already explored as a linguistic validation consultant for your own country. And yes, maybe these are the basic factors I would consider in my case.
I think if you maintain open communication with your client, explaining the efforts that you've gone to recruit patients in detail, then I think they appreciate understanding what you're doing, and it also helps if you're encountering difficulties to find people, that they have a record of what you've actually been doing, so they can use that information themselves, you know, to make a decision on whether you know, the recruitment period needs to be extended or the deadline needs to be extended, because sometimes recruitment is not as straightforward as you may have hoped it would be, you know, and from when you're assigned a project to when it's supposed to be delivered can be sometimes a tight enough turnaround time. So you know, whatever information you can provide your client to justify what you've actually been doing, I think is helpful from their perspective as well.
And I think it's going to have to do with the kind of condition and the age as well, because always recruiting children or recruiting owners of pets, which Cathal will tell us an anecdote about that later. It's going to vary. It may take you 2 weeks, entire 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks. But sometimes what is possible is that if you have 1 or 2 or 3, just start the interviews with them, and the rest, if you cannot recruit them, just let the client know as soon as possible, so alternatives may be found, or even another consultant may jump in and help with the other 2, or you can contact a colleague, another linguistic validation consultant that you know from your language, the language that you cover, to help you recruit. Those are alternatives so that you can cover. And sometimes I've had experiences with even we couldn't find any solution, not even having other people joining in or whatever, and we could move forward with a project with 3 interviews, and then pending the other 2, so that we could, let's say, do preliminary process, and then we could do the other 2 interviews, complete the entire cognitive debriefing, and then deliver on time. So sometimes extreme measures can be implemented so that we can deliver, and in the end everything is saved. Yes, but I have a comment by Eva Nyblom from Sweden, and she indicates that all is built on the relationship between me and the participant. I believe she mentions how to recruit or where we find them is not the question. If you develop a good relation, we will gain a great response. Is my experience finding my participants via Facebook. So I understand that it's building that confidence or trust, building trust, and then yes, it's true that some of us linguistic validation consultants are clinicians as well, and we have a different network, right? So yeah, so in this case, it will all depend on your resources. So we are almost in the hour. So if you have any more questions, you can add them or just ask them directly. But I'm going to let Cathal to tell us his anecdote about the owners of pets, how to recruit owners of pets, what happened with that.
Yeah, so this is my first project where involving animal disease. So it's a project in Ireland where the client was asking me to recruit owners of dogs who are living with chronic canine kidney disease. So I thought that it would be quite straightforward, that I would, contact vets in Ireland and explain the situation, explain the purpose of the research, and that will be it. But I contacted like 60 vets in Ireland, and none of them really expressed interest in participating. And I thought, okay, this is a bit strange. So I spoke to an animal physiotherapist, and she explained to me that in Ireland, at least, it's vets make a lot of money from treating kidney disease. So they have zero interest in in improving or changing anything, because the system for them works perfectly as it is. So basically, I had to try to find, I contacted dog groomers, dog walkers, anything related to dogs that you can imagine. And like my Facebook feed now, I've joined so many dog-related groups in Ireland that my Facebook feed, I don't have any dogs, I don't have any pets, but my Facebook feed is full of dogs. And so yeah, basically I found a dog grooming company who, and they asked me a lot of questions, detailed questions, like more questions than a human illness patient support group asked me. But I think eventually I managed to convince them that I'm genuine, and they actually shared it with their clients, and I was able to get some respondents that way. But for me, it was like an eye-opening experience to realize that it was more difficult to recruit respondents for a project for an animal illness. I found it quite, I don't know, is there an irony there, or I don't know what it is, but I found it interesting. I mean, stressful, but ultimately I found the respondents, and I know a lot more about dogs and vets and animal physiotherapy than I did a couple of months ago. So I'm probably ready to have a dog now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. So do you want to ask anything, the rest of the group? Do you have more questions before we wrap up? Well, I had a final question for Tomislav and for the rest of the group as well, if we have the time. Is how is the success of cognitive debriefing interview measured or evaluated? How do we measure the success of that?
Well, generally, we don't have any KPIs, so to say, for measuring. I'd say two things. One is successful recruitment of the target population. If you're able to recruit the required subjects, you're halfway there. That's great. And the other one, if you find issues, if you detect actual issues within the interviews, so if the interviews help you and detect, point your finger, okay, this questionnaire is problematic. it does not retain the conceptual equivalence. It can be misunderstood. The wording is too complex. The terminology is too technical. And if you are able to detect that in your questionnaire during cognitive debriefing, I'd say that's a very successful project.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good answer.
Yeah, amazing. We have to take into account that more and more we have diverse clinical trials, and there's more diverse population in our cognitive debriefing projects as well. So, for example, countries like France, let's say, with a great diversity of cultures, it makes it more intense, the recruitment process, in the sense that sometimes we need to recruit people with a specific subcultures or specific characteristics that embrace diversity. And that's something that makes our work even much more refined and specialized in our training. So I hope that our session today in the Linguistic Validation Café was informative for all of us and for people listening to us. And if you have any more questions and you want to ask them, you can just share them in the comments in the different places where we post this podcast. And we will be having more sessions about cognitive debriefing in general, because it's a very deep and complex process within linguistic validation. But of course, recruitment is a main issue for us working in the field. And I want to let you know that, don't be scared. If you're a medical translator and want to become a linguistic validation consultant, or you are in the process of becoming a linguistic validation consultant, which some of you are here, don't be scared of recruitment. That's part of the process. You are used to deadlines, you're used to taking responsibility, and in the end, patients appear one way or another, and we solve things. So, and you have the support of our community, so you are not alone. We are here together, helping each other, and which that's the real purpose of the Linguistic Validation Café and all our community. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much, Tomislav, for moderating brilliantly today, and for all your knowledge. Thank you, Natalie, for your insights and great strategies that we are going to take into account. And for you, Cathal, as well. It was amazing, and for sure we know much more of how to cope with the process of recruiting patients. And thank you so much to all the group here who is joining us and participating and keeping this alive. And see you in the next Linguistic Validation Café. Thank you so much for joining us today, and especially to our community of the Linguistic Validation Café, since this is a joint venture and its creation is the result of all of us together. The Linguistic Validation Café is an informal monthly gathering within the Art of Diversity Linguistic Validation Training Program.